The fluorescent office lights hummed a monotonous tune, matching the rhythmic click-clack of Arthur's worn loafers against the linoleum. The digital clock read 5:32 p.m., a reminder that another day had been lost to cubicles and conference calls. Arthur pushed through the heavy glass door of the main entrance, leaving behind the stuffy, recycled air of the office. His gray sedan sat where he had left it that morning. He slid into the driver's seat. The engine turned over with a weary groan that mirrored the ache in his own bones. The drive home was a blurred sequence of brake lights and radio commercials, with one singular goal: get home and read manga. The walk to his front door felt long. Arthur unlocked the door and stepped inside. The silence of the empty apartment stood in stark contrast to the persistent noise of the office. The world outside continued its relentless, impersonal march, but within the small space of his home, the only sound was the quiet ticking of the clock, counting down the seconds until he had to repeat it all again. Arthur moved through his nightly routine on autopilot, brushing his teeth, changing into pajamas, and climbing into bed. He stared at the ceiling, an empty canvas, and for a fleeting moment, wished for anything to break the suffocating monotony. A crash, a storm, or even an earthquake to end the endless loop. The world answered. A low, guttural groan rose from the building's foundations. His bed began to sway, a gentle rocking that quickly escalated into a violent, sickening lurch. The walls groaned in protest, the plaster cracking like thunder. A spiderweb of fractures raced across the ceiling, sending dust and debris raining down. The last thing Arthur registered was the sound of screaming metal and the sight of the world folding in on itself, a final, chaotic collapse before darkness took him. Consciousness returned slowly. The first thing Arthur noticed was the scent: damp earth, sweet blossoms, and something clean and sharp like ozone after a lightning strike. He pushed himself up. His hand sank into a carpet of soft, glowing moss. Above him, a forest canopy stretched toward a deep, velvety blue sky where two moons hung, one a silver crescent, the other a pale, luminous orb. The colossal trees featured bark swirled with iridescent patterns, and leaves the size of dinner plates shimmered with an internal light. This was not the world where he had gone to sleep. This was impossible. Instinct took over. Arthur needed water. He turned his head, straining to hear any sound that signaled its presence. Beyond the ambient hum, he caught a faint, rhythmic gurgle coming from downhill to his left. He took a hesitant step, his loafers sinking into the damp moss, and began to move toward the sound, guided by the glowing canopy. The sound of water grew clearer, pulling him forward, until the snap of a twig to his right froze him in place. His head swiveled, and his breath caught. Partially obscured by enormous, fern-like fronds, stood a beast the size of a small car. Move, Arthur, move. Why can't I move? The beast took a step, its plates clicking softly, and the ground trembled under its weight. It was a hunter. Arthur was the prey. The gurgle of the stream now sounded like a distant, irrelevant dream. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his feet felt rooted to the spot. The beast lowered its head, locking eyes with him, and began to paw at the ground, tearing up chunks of glowing moss and earth. The air grew thick with the scent of raw, predatory hunger. Arthur realized with a sickening certainty that he had to move, or he would not survive the encounter. Panic washed over Arthur, a primal terror warring with his cynical, logical side. He was an accountant, not a mage or a warrior. But as the crystalline beast took another thundering step, a name from the fantasy novels he had spent his life reading erupted from his throat. Ice Spear! Arthur screamed. He thrust his hand out, fueled by desperate, groundless hope. The world responded, with a series of sharp cracks. Half a dozen jagged spears of translucent ice erupted from the moss between him and the beast. They didn't strike the creature, but their sudden, violent appearance sent a shower of dirt and glowing moss into the air. The colossal boar thing skidded to a halt, letting out an infuriated snort. Its amber eyes, previously filled with predatory certainty, flickered with confusion and a sliver of fear. It stepped back, crystalline hide bristling as it stared at the magical shards protruding from the forest floor. Arthur stood frozen, his hand trembling, the faint, cold tingle of the spell still lingering in his fingertips. He had done more than by a few seconds. He had fundamentally altered the rules of the encounter. "Holy crap, no way!" Arthur gasped. The shock on the scaled boar's face mirrored his own, but Arthur's quickly morphed into a reckless grin. The part of his brain that understood debits and credits screamed in protest, drowned out by the thrill of breaking free from reality. "Firestorm!" Arthur bellowed, throwing his hand forward with theatrical flair. The response was immediate and terrifying. At first the spell seemed to work perfectly. A few fireballs materialized in the air in a controlled fashion. Then the air ignited. Dozens of fist-sized fireballs coalesced from nothingness, swirling into a vortex around the boar. They detonated on impact, showering the creature's crystalline hide with superheated shrapnel. Arthur stumbled back, his face stinging from the heat. He realized with dawning horror that this was no game. The power he had unleashed was real, and it was catastrophically uncontrollable. The boar shook its massive head, crystalline plates scorched and cracked, its amber eyes burning with pure rage. Arthur's previous gambit had wounded the beast, but it remained alive. The idea flickered in his mind, born from 100 dark fantasy arcs, a cage of pure magic. "Barrier!" Arthur roared, thrusting both hands forward. He poured his will into the visualization, forming a prison of energy. Rippling walls of translucent, violet light snapped into existence, creating a cylinder around the creature. He imagined the air inside the cage growing hot and dense, stealing the breath from the creature's lungs. The space within the violet walls shimmered, distorting like a heat haze. The boar slammed its shoulder into the barrier with a deafening thud. The energy flexed, but held. It thrashed, snorting plumes of black smoke, but remained trapped. Its powerful legs buckled as the atmosphere turned against it. Arthur watched with clinical, detached precision as the beast's bellows weakened into choked, agonized gasps. Then silence. The heat haze dissipated, and Arthur let the violet barrier collapse. The boar's massive body crumpled to the ground, its crystalline hide now dull and lifeless. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with the acrid tang of burnt fur and scorched earth. As the fires died down, Arthur surveyed the scene. He looked at his own hands, the reality of his actions crashing down. He made a mental note. "I should be more careful with the magic I use." Arthur eyed the immense carcass. He moved with a new, grim efficiency, gathering fallen branches. The strange, lightweight wood of the glowing trees proved surprisingly strong. He lashed them together with tough, vine-like creepers, creating a functional sled. It was exhausting work. His muscles screamed and his hands grew raw. But as he heaved the massive boar onto the platform, a fierce, possessive satisfaction burned in his chest. He had killed it. It would not go to waste. Dragging the sled was a grueling ordeal. The boar's weight carved furrows into the glowing moss, and every step was a strain against the resistance of this alien world. Yet, the promise of water pulled him forward. The gentle gurgle he had heard earlier grew into a melodic rush, and he pushed through a final curtain of giant ferns into a clearing. A crystal-clear stream flowed over smooth, colorful stones. The air was cooler here, carrying a fresh, minty aroma from the bank. Arthur dropped the ropes, his body aching, and stared at the water. It was the most welcome sight he had ever seen. He fell to his knees, plunging his hands into the stream and bringing the liquid to his lips. It was impossibly cold and pure, a shock that felt like life flowing back into his parched body. He drank greedily, the coolness soothing his raw throat. For a moment he felt invincible, a powerful sorcerer who had conquered a wild land. The adrenaline and the lingering, euphoric hum of magic in his veins masked the deep exhaustion clawing at his insides. The crash was as sudden as the spells Arthur had cast. As he pulled his dripping hands from the water, a profound weakness swept through him, heavy as physical weight. The world tilted. The shimmering leaves and twin moons blurred into a swirl of color. A high-pitched ringing drowned out the stream's gentle rush. His body, accustomed to the sedentary comfort of a desk chair, screamed in protest. The aches from dragging the boar and the unaccustomed exertion merged with the void left by his exhausted mana. His legs gave out, and he collapsed onto his side. His last conscious sight was the water flowing inches from his face, mocking his helplessness before darkness pulled him under. Arthur woke sometime later that night. The darkness was disorienting, a void so complete he was unsure if his eyes were open. The stream's rush was his only anchor. The memory of the collapse, of magic and exhaustion merging into an overwhelming force, stung his mind. He knew conjuring another spell was a risk, a drain on reserves he wasn't sure he had, but lying helpless in the blackness was worse. He focused inward, picturing a tiny, contained spark of small light. "Luminate," he whispered. From his palm, a softball of warm, steady light bloomed, pushing back the dark. Arthur lay there, the orb of light floating above his hand, its warmth a comfort in the sleeping wilderness. He was weak, but he was not powerless. The golden orb of light hovered, casting dancing shadows. Arthur sat up, the movement sending waves of ache through his body. His mind raced, piecing together the fragments of this terrifying reality. Magic. It's real. But how? The raw power he had unleashed felt like a wild animal. The memory of the firestorm's fury and the ice spear's erratic aim was a stark warning. Was it the words? The intention? He tried to apply the logic of fantasy games, seeking a system to understand and control. His gaze fell on the boar. He focused, concentrating on the image of ice. Nothing happened. He tried the word cold. Still nothing. The carcass remained stubbornly unchanged. Frustration bubbled, but then a new thought struck him. He looked at a nearby pockmarked boulder partially buried in the moss. He pointed a finger and spoke the word aloud. Ice. The effect was violent. With a muffled crack, the boulder exploded from within, sending shards of rock and ice flying. Arthur stared at the crater, horrified. That could have been his food. The realization hit him. The words were the trigger, but without precision. They were a sledgehammer. He took a deep, shaky breath and picked a smaller stone. This time, he didn't just shout. He closed his eyes, picturing a slow, creeping frost, a gentle breath stealing the warmth from the stone. He opened his eyes, pointed, and said, "Ice." His voice steady. A delicate lacework of frost bloomed across the surface, spreading until the stone was encased in a perfect, silent shell. It wasn't just about the power. It was about the will behind it. Arthur wondered. The words are an amplifier, but are they a necessity? What if I were gagged, or wounded, or needed to be silent? This time he didn't speak. He held the image in his mind with perfect clarity. A slow, creeping death by cold. He made a slow, deliberate waving motion, beckoning the chill. To his astonishment, it worked. A faint, silvery mist emanated from the boulder, and a delicate rime of frost formed. It was slower, far more gentle than the explosive freezing from before. Arthur turned his attention to the scaled boar. Again, a silvery mist emanated from the carcass, and frost began to coat its crystalline plates. Realizing his survival depended on understanding this magic, he knew he had to test further. He turned toward a distant tree. He focused on the image of a single, contained sphere of flame and flicked his fingers toward it. A tiny, weak puff of sparks, like a dying campfire, erupted at the base of the trunk and sputtered out. He repeated the motion, keeping the image clear, and added the word, "Fireball." A grapefruit-sized orb of flame shot from his hand and impacted the tree. He started small, targeting pebbles and twigs. He focused on a pebble, picturing a tiny flame alighting on its surface like a match strike. "Flame," he whispered. A small, controlled puff of orange fire appeared and lasted a second. Success. He repeated this dozens of times, each attempt a lesson in restraint, funneling immense power into a minuscule output. He slumped back, the exertion draining his remaining reserves, but a grim satisfaction settled in his soul. He was no longer just an accountant. He was a student of a deadly art, and he had just passed his first lesson. If you enjoy these stories, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help this channel grow so I can continue to improve and provide a wide variety of stories. Thanks for watching.